You good?
No, I have everything on full screen.
Oh yeah, I always forget to do that, bro.
All right, whenever.
All right. What's good with y'all boys, man? Welcome back to Rand Kyle Everything Sports Podcast, man. Huge week last week. A lot of games, a lot of great games too. So we're gonna break down our top 25 after week 4, baby. All right, Ray, who's coming in at 25 for us?
So starting off with a few teams that weren't ranked for me last year, we got Kansas. Haven't played a whole lot of competition, but winning games like they should be. A little closer in some of the games than I thought they should be. Had a Nevada team first week they only beat by a touchdown, and Illinois last week they only beat by 11. We got a real big test with Texas coming up this week, so we'll get to see a lot from them this week. Next up is Fresno State. I think a lot of people are getting real high on them. They're blowing teams out. They had a real close call last week. They beat Purdue the week before that, but then two really convincing wins before that. Have Nevada this upcoming week and expect them to hand them pretty easily. Next up is Tennessee. Didn't have them ranked either. Struggled a little early in the beginning this week, being within a touchdown of Austin Peavy at halftime, but I did have two convincing wins before that versus Virginia and UTSA, except they lost that first game to Florida, but it's not a bad loss at all. Next up, we have Ole Miss. I had them at 20 last week. Now I got them at 22. Lost to Alabama, but that Alabama showed us a lot more than we thought they would this week, so it's not a terrible loss. But I have a chance for redemption this week, playing number 13 LSU. Next up is Florida. That Florida team had a win this week against Charlotte. Wasn't too convincing. Would have liked to see a little bit more out of them, but have a good game coming up this week against Tennessee. Next up is Oregon State, dropping 4 spots for me this week after losing to Washington State. It wasn't a convincing loss. I think the game was very close. It's 35-38. I don't think that Washington State is significantly better, and I think a lot of Washington State, so it makes me think a lot of Oregon State, so I didn't drop them too much. But going to get to see a lot against them this week against Utah. Next up, I have Missouri, still 4-0. They're going to start conference play pretty soon with in the SEC, so we'll really get to see how good they really are. But they have a Vanderbilt team this week that I think they're going to blow out. At 16, North Carolina blew out Pitt this week and have a bye this week, so not going to see much change for them. But hopefully we'll get to see them soon. Next up, I have Duke at 16. This Duke team moved down 1 spot, not because they did anything bad. They blew out Connecticut this week, just because I moved a couple teams above them. We're going to get to see a lot from them this week with Notre Dame. And we'll really get to see how good this Duke team is. If they can hang with Notre Dame, they're going to prove me and a lot of people wrong. I'm pretty high on their offense, but we're going to have to see how they can hold up against that Notre Dame offense on defense. At 15, I have Alabama moving up 3 spots. Milroe wasn't amazing, but he did what he needed to do, which is be consistent, which he hasn't been so far. He was 17 of 21 for 225 yards, but the big thing for me with them is they spread the ball out. They had 10 different receivers with a catch, and their most receptions from a receiver was only 3. They beat that Ole Miss team this week by 14. It was a convincing win, even though it was close at halftime. But I do believe they showed they were a better team than Ole Miss, and I like that Ole Miss team. So if Milroe can consistently play like that, play like a game manager, and just be consistent with his throws and not turn the ball over, I think they'll be a good team because they have a lot around them. They play Mississippi State this week, so we'll see how well they can hold up against a decent Mississippi State team. But that Alabama team does, with that SEC schedule coming up, have potential to lose every SEC game they play this year, which is not normal for that Alabama team. In 14, I have Oklahoma, still undefeated. I haven't played a whole lot of competition. Beat Cincinnati this week by 14 and play Iowa State this week. In 13, I have Washington State. Showed us a lot. Moved up 9 spots for me because they beat that Oregon State team. They have a bye this week, and they have a good UCLA team who is coming off a loss to Utah. But that Utah game was very close. They lost 14-7, and one of them was a pick six in the first play of the game. So the UCLA team is a lot better than people think. I think the AP polls don't have them ranked. I don't have them ranked, which is kind of tragic. It's just too many good teams right now, but I think they're going to be able to have a really, really good game against that Washington State team that I like a lot. At 12, I have LSU beat Arkansas 34-31, and then have Ole Miss coming up this week. Only had that one loss in week 1, but I think the LSU team is really, really good, and I think they're the ceiling for the SEC right now, and I think everybody's trying to catch them. I can't wait to see their matchup in the SEC against Alabama. I think it's going to decide who plays Georgia in the conference championship. So looking forward to seeing them in that LSU in that SEC slate. Number 11, I have Utah. Didn't have as convincing of a win against UCLA as I thought they would. So I bumped them down one slot, but they play Oregon State this week. So we're going to see them against a good Oregon State side, and it wouldn't surprise me if they lost that game. At number 10, I have Oregon. That offense was really, really good against Colorado, putting up 42 points in 3 quarters. They could have put up 70 if they wanted to. Bo Nix had almost 300 yards in 3 quarters. They theoretically shut out Colorado. Colorado scored in the 4th quarter when it was garbage time. They made Colorado look like the Colorado from last year. They completely shut them up, and I believe that Oregon team is a lot better than people are giving them credit for. They have Stanford this week, and they'll probably be a blowout. Next up, I have Washington. Beat Cal this week by 27 points, but did allow 32 points. So it worries me a little bit on their defensive side. And I wonder how they're going to hold up on the defensive side, but their offense is looking consistent. And they play Arizona this week. Next up, I have Penn State, who did look very, very good. They stayed the same for me in my rankings, but that's just because there's a lot of good teams above them. They looked really good against Iowa this week, even though I think their offense showed more than their defense because their defense did hold Iowa out, but I think Iowa's offense is absolutely terrible. So putting up 31 points is more impressive to me than shutting out Iowa. Next up, they have Northwestern, which shouldn't be a problem for them. Then at 7, I have Texas. Blew out Baylor this week. I don't think anybody expects anything different. That Baylor team is not very good, but they have one of their bigger tests since Alabama coming up with number 24 Kansas. And the 6th spot, I have Michigan. Beat Rutgers this week pretty convincingly, but then have Nebraska coming up next. At number 5, I have Florida State. Coming off a win against Clemson in overtime was a little closer than I would have liked for it to be for them, which is why I bumped them down one slot. I'm not too high on that Clemson team, and I thought they would beat them a little bit more convincingly, but they got the job done. Still undefeated. Still have that convincing win in week 1. So I really like this Clemson team. I think Jordan Travis needs to show a little bit more. He was very good early on, but was not his Heisman winning self, his future Heisman winning self in this game. And number 4, I have Georgia. I had them in number 2 last week. I bumped them down 2 spots, not just because they started off slow against UAB, which they did come out and end up beating them 49-21, but just because I had a little mix-up in my top 3 because a lot of teams showed me some this week. Got Auburn this week. If they start out slow, I don't feel like they're going to have too much of a trouble with Auburn because Auburn can't score. They have a major quarterback problem, but that Auburn defense is good. So if Auburn come out with a decent quarterback performance from Thorne, the Georgia team needs to watch out. And moving past Auburn against other SEC opponents, if they come out slow like they have been against UAB, against South Carolina, all these teams, this Georgia team is going to be in a lot of trouble when they're down at halftime going into the second half with a good offense and good defense on the other side. And number 3, I have Notre Dame. I didn't drop them too much because their loss is a really quality loss. And in my eyes, I'm not 100% sure after watching that game that Ohio State's better than them, even though they won on the last play of the game by 3 points. The Notre Dame team is still really, really good. But I had them number 1 on my rankings last week, bumped to number 3 this week. Like I said, I'm still not sure that Ohio State team is better than them, but that Ohio State team showed me a lot this week. But they have a good matchup coming this week against Duke. At number 2, I have USC. That offense is just really, really good for them. Their defense worries me a little bit, allowing 28 points last week. But this team is consistently putting up numbers in the 40s and higher. They have Colorado this week. I think it's going to be a blowout. I think their offense is better than Oregon's. I think their defense is comparable. I think it's going to be similar in score, and I think Caleb Williams won't play the 4th quarter. At number 1, I have Ohio State. Just an absolute, just really good game against Notre Dame. Just really showed me a lot. I wasn't super high on them. I had them in 6 last week. I didn't think this game was going to be within 2 touchdowns. I thought that Notre Dame was really going to show us something, and I think they did. I think both teams played. It showed us that they're both contenders for the college football playoffs. But Ohio State did get the job done. They showed us they can hang. Even if I don't believe they're a better team from the game, they won the game. And this week they have a bye, so they'll get a little bit of rest going into 2 weeks from now. That's my updated top 25.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any really big problems. I'd probably move Duke ahead of Bama from 16 to 15, but that's not too crazy. And I think that even with the Florida loss, I think Tennessee's better than Missouri, and I think that Florida's also better than Missouri. But we'll get to that later on. But yeah, I mean, I like it. I don't see any big problems at all.